Curtis Allen joins us on the Hawks Zone tonight from the SeahawksDraftBlog.com. That's where you find most of his work, breaking down a lot of cap stuff with this team and just player salary, where we sit. It's nice to just kind of be like, yeah, you know what, we'll do this offseason. John's just got to go spend a lot of money. This is a guy that does a lot of homework specifically on that, and he is going to come on the show tonight, answer some of those questions, and also because a guy that just got let go, Tyrell Dotson. We're going to talk to him about that. What was that about? Cap issue, whatever it is. Curtis is coming on. He's going to break down a bunch of questions we have. He's going to help us answer those. So, Bryce, I'm fired up tonight, man. I know you had Curtis on first go around, great convo. I'm sure the second one right here is going to be, just as good, maybe better.
Yeah, no, having Curtis on at this point with everything that's gone on, the Dotson news that just broke earlier today, it's going to make it a really interesting conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, so guys, just before we get into that, if you guys have been watching the channel, you like what you're watching, go down, hit the subscribe button for us, like the videos, share the videos. It just helps the channel out. And also, you can go buy us a coffee or a beer. It's down. Everything's down in the description. It helps the channel out. We appreciate it. And and everybody that's been supporting the channel, we can't say enough. We appreciate all of it. So, on the other side of the Hawks Zone, Curtis Allen.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. Look at this run. What a run. Get off me.
DK.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's John Schneider with the Seattle Seahawks.
And Washington's got away. Leon Wilson to catch. Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. The Seahawks are going to host the NFC Championship.
Every year, the NFL does.
Is it going to be another 9-8?
We've got to finish some things.
They have to fix the offensive
Part of his
line.
success and part of
Ambition of being the LOB
Want to hear that's trading DK Metcalf.
Play him aggressive.
This is the HawksZone Rundown with Ryan and Bryce.
Returning on the show tonight with us is Curtis Allen, cap specialist with the Seahawks draft blog. You probably know him through a lot of Rob Staten's work. Awesome to have Curtis back. This time of the year, we're sitting at a bye week right now, so we have some time to talk about the Hawks, reflect on the Hawks. But Curtis, we appreciate you coming on the show tonight and chopping up Seahawks with us.
Thank you very much, guys, for having me on. I appreciate it. And there's a lot to talk about. So I think this is a really great time to kind of take a step back and take stock of where the team is, where the fans are, and where we go forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's kick it right off. I mean, this is something that just happened that, wasn't really on the agenda when we talked about having you on, but Seahawks making another move, and this time another linebacker, and Tyrell Dotson cut today from the team. A few weeks back, Jerome Baker was out the door, and a lot of people were thinking, what they seen on tape, just wasn't fitting in here. We applauded them for making the move, and they go out and they get another linebacker that they think, hey, this might fit Mike's system a little better. And then we said, okay, and then we got Dotson as the other linebacker. We're ready to go. This one seemed like a little more surprising, but the way this season is going right now, and people can look at the record and say, well, we're 4-5, we're right in there. But man, you see the Niners getting healthy, the Cardinals are coming on. Yeah. To me, we're a little further away than our record, and that division's kind of showing right now. What does this indicate, this move today for you with the Dotson move?
I think it really indicates that they've had a chance to step back, take stock of where things are, and they realized they needed some changes. I don't know if you got a chance to read some of the comments or listen to the comments from Mike McDonald today. He was very careful to indicate he loves the two linebackers. They were great guys. They worked hard for the team, but they said they're just not getting it done. And that seemed to be really evinced by seeing, the rush defense, especially with Baker. Of course, we saw that more immediately than with Dotson. But with Dotson, we saw some things that were good, but I think Mike McDonald, more so than I had thought when we started, is really focusing on the linebackers as the engine of the defense. We've had it for so long that we've had Bobby Wagner, KJ Wright, and the Seahawks kind of not pay attention much to the defensive line, that we're kind of starving for the defensive line to be the engine. But it would appear that Mike McDonald is making these changes to sort of shape the defense his way. And I think there's also a real clear indicator that they're making the moves that a first-year head coach team makes at times. Pete Carroll, if you remember, he made a record number of 285 moves or something like that his first year. They're just doing it a little differently. They're getting these guys on the field. They're getting these guys involved. They're seeing what they got. And now that we're at a spot where they can take a breath a little bit, see where they're at, they're making some of these moves. It's been speculated, and it wouldn't shock me at all if they said, we want Tyrese Knight on the field. They talked to Dodson, told them what they were expecting, and he might have said, hey, could you give me a fair shake and just release me and give me a shot with another team? There's so many teams right now that are in the mix that I think a linebacker of his ability is probably going to be valuable to certain teams for a stretch run. So he probably was ready for a shot. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems to fit with where things are going. So I can't interpret this one move as okay, we're dumping everything and we're going to play the young players and we're going to lose games. It doesn't matter this year. I think we're not quite there yet. I think we want to see, like you mentioned, we want to see how we match up against the NFC West, because 3 of the next 4 are NFC West games. So if you can't win in your division, you're sunk. You could beat other teams and that's fine, but you've got to win in your division. And I think this next 4 games are a real litmus test for this team.
Yeah, no, when I saw the move today, Curtis, what I think they did is I think they took a massive look at this roster, where they're at. And I think there may have been a miscalculation at the beginning of the year by John Schneider and Mike McDonald on what this team is, what they could potentially be. And I think that's where you look at a guy like Dotson. And Dotson lately, I noticed, had started trying to go like underneath blocks, not fitting the run either as well. And so you bring in Ernest Jones, and you can see the immediate impact Ernest Jones has made on this defense. And I think it was about time that they kind of made a move. And you're probably right. They probably went to Dotson and said, hey, look, we've looked at the tape. We've stepped back. We want to get Tyrese Knight on the field a little bit more. And they probably did him a solid and said, okay, look, we're going to move on from you and give you a chance to catch on with him. Because Mike even said that, I'm pretty sure, in his press conference today, was like, hey, we wanted to do right by him, give him a chance to catch on with another team. Yeah. I think this is a little bit of we understand we're not where we want to be. And I think it's also this upcoming offseason is going to be huge in what direction this team goes. Because I think what you're seeing here is you're seeing 2 linebackers that we got late in the process because we were late to hire a coach and build our staff, have now been let go because they don't fit what Mike McDonald wants, the way they play linebacker. So, it'll be interesting to see if Dotson gets claimed tomorrow, though. I think the Seahawks are off the hook for the remaining $1 million. Otherwise, it's a dead cap hit, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. But, they've activated Josh Jobe to the roster now that they waived Tyrell Dotson, which is another interesting move because that tells me he's won that 3rd cornerback spot away from Trey Brown. So that's another interesting kind of move in itself. And you still have to see another domino fall if they're going to bring Abe Lucas back, because I'm pretty sure they have to bring him back this week or he just reverts back to Pup and is done for the year. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And if anyone hasn't read or watched the interview today with Mike McDonald, I thought it was fascinating. His comments were very, very insightful. They were intriguing into showing what's going on behind the scenes. We didn't get full detail, but he made a comment about the linebackers. He said we made these 2 moves with Baker and Dodson for completely different reasons, he said. And I thought that was interesting. So my assumption with that, my interpretation of that is Baker was just so injured that they were going to cut him, and they had to get a salary off the books. They found a team that would take a salary. John Schneider mentioned that in the pregame last week, before the Bills game, said that we found someone that would take a salary, and that was kind of a win for them. But also they got Ernest Jones, which obviously is probably something they wanted to do from the get-go. So there was two options there. But then that means what does that mean as far as Dotson, moving off from Dotson then? There is a financial aspect. He was due some incentive money, we found out, if he kept playing in this next game. I don't think that would be it. It would be 400,000, 500,000 or so of incentives. I don't know if the Seahawks are really scraping that hard that they'd make that move then. But I honestly think it's more about his production on the field. And like you mentioned, Bryce, just we got to get these guys in shape, even if we have to take some lumps with Tyrese Knight in there. This is just what we have to do. I think there's kind of a cold reality to some of his statements today.
Well, here's an interesting part of it too. So here's literally a chunk from his thing. Bob Condotta just put it up from the press conference when he answered today when asked about what he learned during the bye week assessment of the Seahawks. Mike McDonald said, "I think it's all about how of what we're doing. The X's and O's are important, but how we make it come to life is a secret sauce." And I think when you kind of see it on all levels of the assembly line, from how we game plan, how we package it, how we coach it, how we drill it, and how we practice it, how it shows up on game day, when that system is right, we play good football. Mm-hmm. When that system is kind of jacked up on any part of the process, I feel like that's where we're falling short. So from top to bottom, we've got to do a better job of packaging it and make it coming to life out here on the practice field and then on Sunday. So clearly, there has been some issues in that process at practice and in the facility before we even get to the game, where there is a issue that they've kind of identified clearly and somehow in that assembly line where it's caused issues. Now that could be players potentially, maybe they were struggling at that point, but I wonder if that's also on the coaches, how they're delivering stuff to these guys. It's just a very interesting quote. Like, even the fact that on another note, they brought up the fact that they're looking at potentially moving Connor Williams. Like basically Anthony Bradford is on super thin ice, it sounds like, where he's like essentially in the point of, if you screw up again, we may consider moving Williams to guard at right guard and putting Sundell or Olu at center. That's another big thing because, they make that switch. That's another indictment on a move. Like, it didn't work out. And this is how bad our guard situation is. We have to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate the honesty. I really, that's why I was raving about the press conference today, because the Pete Carroll press conferences, everything's great. Everything's wonderful. We just need to tighten some things up. And so there were some great elements in that. When your head coach says, your right guard, it is what it is, and we're considering things, that's not great. But he also acknowledged in the same comment that schematically there probably could do some things better to help. And I've kind of harped on that. And you and I talked about it to a degree when we talked last time, Bryce, about this is a young offensive line. Abe Lucas doesn't have a really known timeline. Why would you put your right tackle on an island with all of these great pass rushers? Like the first 3 or 4 weeks, they faced some pretty great pass rushers. And kept their right tackle on an island instead of having, a tight end block or have some Geno plays where he literally just gets the ball and rolls out to his right and rolls away from a pass rush. So there's that. And then the other thing that I interpreted from his comments, and when we talked about having this stream, I was thinking about the state of the Seahawks and how that applies and where we're at. I think he's really hit on something with the assembly line thinking, because you've probably seen it's really boom or bust with this team. I think the Patriots game, they were actually holding the Patriot runners really well, and then they had like 3 explosive runs that just blew the game up. But every other run was like 2 yards, 2.5 yards. Last Sunday, the Ram game, they had the Rams, I think it was 7 3-and-outs, and the Rams had never done that in ages. And so, they were doing very well. And then all of a sudden you have these disastrous plays. So it's sort of trying to minimize the bad and then keep the good that you have going on there. So so what he's telling us is what we're seeing on the field. There's things that they're doing that are actually great, but they're just overshadowed by some of these horrible plays that we're seeing. So it's a mixture of trying to make sure that you minimize the bad and keep the good and maybe even maximize the good.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that because, I think, and that's what we talk about having, putting a complete game together. I mean, the Atlanta game was probably the closest thing we saw to a complete game from this team. And that was coming out of the 10-day, mini bye, so and that's kind of been the struggle because, you look at the team and you said, a lot of people said, and even Dotson, I listened to his press conferences in at camp and stuff like, I think I remember one quote he was talking about how good this defense is going to be, and I'm not even going to reveal it yet because I'm going to sound stupid. You guys just wait till the end of the season. But then obviously Baker, there was rumors of him not happy here, and just stuff like that. Like certain things going on, you're seeing things on the field. You saw like the DK pouting, and you saw guys sort of a lot of undisciplined stuff happening. Just a lot of sloppiness kind of play on the field. Like you said, it's overshadowing some of the good stuff. Just the JSN 180, right? Overshadowed because of 2 red zone interceptions. And it's just, so that's where for me, I want to see, it's a tough one because a lot of people will revert back to, hey, it's his first year, give him a break. He's the new head coach. But coming into the season, the expectations were, hey, we just need a guy that now people are going to listen to the message. Pete's message is getting dry. We won 9 games the last 2 years. We have talent on this team. We just need another guy to elevate certain players. Reek Woolens, get spooned to the next level. Just, have this guy. And then you see a lot of like reverting back to, hang on. It's his first year. So, and then you hear stuff also like, well, Pete went 7-9 his first year. Like that's all fine. But what do you need to see, say, at the end of this year to give you, say, sort of like a little more confidence coming into this offseason the next year? For example, with Pete, you had beast mode. You beat the Saints in the playoffs, the defending champs. That's going to get you believing in something, right? And then, like you said, they overhauled a lot of the roster and this and that. But you had that to hang your hat on, like this guy might be special here in Seattle. This guy, Pete Carroll, it might be, if we continue to play the sloppiness, and that's why for me, it's kind of, I can't wait till the Niners game because we're coming out of a bye.
Yeah.
So because for me, if you don't see any difference, if you see a little greatness, but then a lot of sloppiness, the same kind of thing, that it makes it tough for me just to say, okay, now we still have a few more games, right? But you're in week 11. What do you sort of need to see at the end of this year when this season's said and done, win total aside? What do you need to see to say, okay, I'm confident that we're going to take, like, we're building something, we're taking a step here in the right direction?
Well, there's a lot of factors. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is confidence from the coaching staff in being able to call the game that they want to call. I know McDonald a couple of weeks ago mentioned that we can't get into our playbook because we're limited by these errors and these challenges that we're having. So there's a little bit of that. We're not able to actually unlock the full potential of this team because of the sloppiness that you mentioned and the basics, and just like our right tackle and our right guard can be completely overwhelmed by the defense. You just can't. There's a reason they call those guys game wreckers on the other side of the ball. So if you can't get out of your own way, you can't really deploy some of the really interesting and really fascinating stuff that you got, because football's a chess game. I mean, you really are working against your opponent. You're setting them up with different moves and plays. Okay, we're going to fake over here, and it'll pay dividends later when we run that same play in the third quarter. And you can't do that if you're just trying to keep your head above water. So I think there's also a level of confidence that the coaching staff needs to develop a little bit more with their calling and trusting their guys to a degree that really instills confidence in them. I think a lot of fans on Twitter really hit it with the Ram game when they had 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. And the 2 plays that they called were just plunges by Ken Walker. Now, let's be honest. They should get a yard out of those 2 downs. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They should be able to do that. They should be able to look at Lakin and Charles Cross and say, get us a yard. That's all we need. Just get us a yard. That's fine. However, I was struck by, and the fans on Twitter were right, that the 4th and 1 in the Apple Cup game where they did that swing play to Rome Odunze, and it caught everybody in the nation off guard. Everybody in the stadium, the cameraman got caught off guard, and he ran for what, like 19 or something like that. And it was gutsy. This is the game. I mean, if we don't make this is the game. And right now, I'm not seeing a lot of that kind of stuff. Like, we're going to try this, because I think the confidence isn't there. And what's happening is you look really, really stupid if those things don't happen, and it's a confidence crusher at the same time if that aren't able to make these things work. So there's some of that, and I think just bare bones, we've just got to be more consistent. We've just got to get out of our own way and be able to function. Some of the play calls that they have, almost kind of like in the Pete Carroll era, they almost are like, well, we'll have Geno Smith sit in the pocket. He'll scan around. He'll find a guy, and he'll throw. Well, Aiden Hutchinson is lining up over Stone Forsythe. That's just not a sound strategy. It's just not. So you have to be you have to be cocky and confident, but you also have to be a little humble to realize, hey, we can't do everything that we want to do in this game. But if we do what we can do here, and here, later in the game, we can take some shots and we can catch them off guard.
So, Curtis, I got a question for you about this Seahawks offseason. So we look at this team and we constructed this coaching staff. But if I look at what John Schneider and this front office has done in this offseason, they signed Tyrell Dodson, signed Jerome Baker, signed Jenkins, Tomlinson, George Fant, Pharaoh Brown, Nick Harris, and they re-signed Noah Fant, and we allowed Damian Lewis, Jordan Burks, Bobby Wagner, and effectively Darrell Taylor to leave. If I look at that as what our 2004 offseason was, this might be the worst offseason John Schneider's had as a GM, because you've got both linebackers were cut in the last 3 weeks. Jenkins, basically, in my opinion, I think won't come back and start, because I think Kobe Bryant's got that spot opposite Julian Love. So he's going to now be probably your third safety with Kayvon Wallace going to IR. Lagan Tomlinson has not been a good left guard. George Fant has played a total of 30 snaps between his knee injuries. Pharaoh Brown's now your third tight end. Nick Harris lost the position to Olu in camp, and we traded him away. Noah Fant's been kind of essentially invisible for the 3rd year in a row. He hasn't scored a touchdown, I think they said, since 2022.
Yeah.
How do we have confidence that next offseason is going to be any better? And that's what worries me when I look at this list of guys that John Schneider's gone out and acquired, and, he's supposed to be, as everyone hails, one of the top GMs in the NFL. When I read off that list to you, does that give you confidence for 2025 for him to correct this?
It's not confidence inspiring at all, is it? It's
No.
very difficult to go, okay, he's the guy to right things around and change the ship. I do think there is a little bit of disorganization because of the timeline of things with Pete Carroll and getting the coaching staff set up and making sure that everybody was on the same page. I do feel there was a little bit more of a throwing darts at a dartboard and seeing what happens than having an organized, structured plan of attack. And I think also that there's some things that you can do. I don't think you can completely strip your team bare in one offseason and go and get the guys that you really, really want to make it happen. So I think there's a little bit of patience that needs to happen. And if you want a silver lining, I'm just glad that they acknowledge that these things aren't working.
Right.
I the last couple of years before that, they've just relied on guys and just said, yeah, it's going to work. It's going to work. It's going to work. I mean, Jamal Adams is the prime example. They just kept telling us it was going to work, and it didn't work. But they had to spend $35-40 million to find that out. And now they're just, okay, they're cutting bait. When they cut Jamal Adams this year, the cap guys said, we're going to take all the dead cap this year. We're not going to spread it out. And so there's a little bit of decisiveness that I like. So I'm not crazy about all the decisions they made in hindsight, but the fact that they're making some of these tough decisions now, it is kind of encouraging. So maybe there is a little bit more to be had in the January and February period in 2025.
The one thing for me, though, and this is the thing that, me and Ryan have talked about on this numerous times, is we were kind of sold on we need to just change the staff and add some pieces, and this team was ready to go.
Yeah.
And we were going to be in the playoffs, and we were going to be pushing. If these are the moves for a guy that's adding pieces to a roster that's supposedly ready to go, I don't have a lot of faith, because a lot of these guys on this roster, like that I just spouted off on this list, like the guys we let go of, Damian Lewis, Jordan Brooks, Bobby Wagner, even Darrell Taylor, they're all doing way better where they are now than when they were here. Like, Bobby's still decent. Like, yes, Bobby has issues in coverage, and we all knew that, but Bobby's still I would say a upgrade over Dotson or Baker. I think Jordan Brooks would have been fine here, and Damian Lewis would have been a hell of a lot better than Lincoln Tomlinson. And we look at what we're paying Noah Fant to be the 11th highest paid tight end in football, and he doesn't produce like the 11th highest paid tight end in football, and he never really has since he's been here. So yeah, it's moves like that where I go and I kind of go, what is John thinking, and why? Why are we doing these moves? So maybe you're right, and maybe the fact that they've cut bait should give some confidence to the 2025 offseason, but John Schneider's going to have to do a lot of things in this coming up offseason to really gain back a lot of my trust in his assessment of where this team is at and how they're going forward.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think that's a fair statement. One of the things that I always have to keep in the back of my head, we don't know if Damian Lewis even wanted to play here. Maybe he wanted to go to Carolina. Maybe Jordan Brooks, the tax rate is too high in Washington. I want to play in Florida where there isn't an income tax. That kind of stuff. I like the warm weather. I like the nightlife, whatever. But you're right. There is some, hindsight, second guessing with that. I will say, like with Darrell Taylor, he had one great game when he first went over to Chicago, and he's kind of vanished ever since. And they've kind of had to resort to being a package only guy again, because he just isn't very good against the run and the other things. And some of those problems that we've seen are kind of resurfacing to a degree. But yeah, I think there's definitely some thoughts that could be, we need to reevaluate the general manager, just like they've taken the bye week and reevaluated their processes on that assembly line as well. So there's a degree to which we need to kind of have that discussion, and he needs to be held accountable.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, like, I think Bryce would agree with this too. I don't think we're upset with the Darrell Taylors walking out of this building, or Bobby Wagner's, or the Jordan Brooks. But it was like, what's the plan after that? Like you said, throwing darts on the board's a good assessment, because it was kind of evident with a lot of the 1-year deals, and that's why you bring up the difference between Jamal and Tyrell is like, well, there was no investment in Dotson, whereas he gave up just the farm for Jamal, and then on top of that gives him a huge contract. So it just became a bigger disaster, because it's like, oh wait, he'll get right. Don't worry, we're gonna keep trying to throw him out there. So it's just, I think what you're kind of left with now is at this point of the year, and you talk about reflecting, is just more questions than answers at this point. If we all three of us sat down 5-6 months ago, we would be feeling like we're pretty secure with some of these questions, right? You're like Bryce was saying, we add a piece here. You talk about the three-headed monster receiver. Hey, we're good. Check. Geno Smith, check. O-line, well, it's a wait and see. It's Scott Huff's got a lot of work, but we can, with Ryan Grubb and the creativity from Washington, he can work around some of that stuff. And we really haven't seen a lot of that. Like you said, it's the talk of the O-line is just getting tiring, right? And like even Damian Lewis, would you pay him that much money? I don't know. I mean, he wasn't like, yes, he's better than Lakin, but at what cost, right? And that's so. But so moving over, and it's funny because it's tough, right? We're still in the middle of the season, but I think the outlook now and is this team's not going to make the playoffs. I mean, it would have to be, honestly, they'd have to go on some kind of run, and unless they showed me something on Sunday that just changes my mind. I mean, if they lose this game, they're all but done. They're all but done. So you kind of look ahead a little bit, and you being a cap specialist, and the emphasis from a lot of fans is this O-line's got to get better, but that's easier said than done, right? I mean, money aside, just revamping an O-line is one thing to bring in guys, but evaluating talent. There's just so much that goes into it. How are the guys going to work together? So kind of a two-part then, because also with DK Metcalf, who is that's going to be a topic conversation with his contract. There's fans that, hey, get rid of DK and we'll clean up this O-line, man. Get rid of his money and put it towards O-line and we're good. How do you look at these two situations? Do you look at those things as one? Like if we bring in DK, we can't solve the O-line, or if we sign him, or if we get rid of him, then we got a better chance to clean up. Or is it two totally different things? And can we do both? Can we lock up DK long term and still figure out a way to at least improve this O-line where it's serviceable?
Yeah, I think there's all kinds of options. There isn't, you have to add this and you have to cut this guy to make all this happen. The Seahawks, the last year since they brought in Joey Lane, have been a lot more interesting as far as how they handle the cap. So they're more willing to go out and buy on the credit card. John Schneider for years was, I'm a Packer guy. We don't go on shopping on the credit card. I'm a pay as you go guy. And, it's the old, it's easier to have a savings account that you just put money into than to have an investment account that you really have to watch. So that opening up in their way can really find some opportunities there for them to really do what they want to do. There's opportunities there for them to massage things around, make sure that they have enough cap to do it. The biggest thing that I find, guys, is salary cap room and writing a big check is just never the solution. That's the easiest thing that we point to, that just go write a check and it'll be fine. After that, it's one piece of the solution to get it. So it's the team environment, having your guys in the weight room, training, having guys buy in, injuries, all those things that work together. It's just not one simple solution. There's a bunch of levers that you can pull. And frankly, they have the levers that they can pull. The way they structure their contracts, yes, they'll have to eat some dead money, but there's a bunch of contracts that they can evaluate this offseason and say, we've got to make a hard call, just like they did with Dotson and Baker.
Who would you immediately say, hey, I don't see on this team, or they should cut this weight in the offseason?
I don't think. Money. Yeah, I don't think there's some hidden players. There's a lot of players that we all agree on. Draymond Jones, you just can't have a cap hit of $25 million next year for Draymond Jones. He just hasn't played up to his standard. I never expected him to be a Nick Bosa or a Myles Garrett, but we need more than what he has brought to the team. Now, that could be some of that is use by the team. The first half of last year, he was not used in his traditional spot. And then when they brought up Leonard Williams in, he started playing really well. And they said, well, what's going on? You're playing well lately. He said, well, they put me at my spot that I know and I'm comfortable with. So there's a little bit of blame to go around on that one. I think Noah Fant, his cap hit next year is $13.5 million. There's $9 million to pick up. I like Noah Fant. If we're going to make a tight end centric offense, I'm okay with having him on the team, but we just haven't been able to do that yet. And so there's a chunk there. Rayshon Jenkins is probably in line with the other guys that we've talked about, Dodson, Baker, that just hasn't done well. I mean, I railed about it on Twitter, seeing him, take the wrong run fit and being responsible for a 70-yard touchdown. And it just hurts so bad to see that, especially when a guy, what is he, 30 or 31, something like that. And, a strong safety, you really, in a strong safety, there's one thing he's got to do is stop the run game. That's really his biggest responsibility. So there's money there. There's also, this hurts to say real bad, there's money in Tyler Lockett. There's over $30 million in cap charges next year on Tyler Lockett. Now, if it was my call, Tyler Lockett would be a Seahawk until he decides not to be a Seahawk. But there's just so much money on the cap that if you're going to extend DK and you're going to give Jackson Smith and Jigba the role that they gave him against the Rams, you can't have a $30 million cap hit for a guy that is in that third wide receiver role. You just can't.
No. Well, and with Lockett in particular, for me, like, I just haven't seen Lockett be Lockett a lot this year. Like, he's had his moments. I'm not going to say he hasn't.
Yeah.
But we had Jackson Bevins on with our big roundtable this past weekend, and a couple of the guys, Jackson, Dan, and Brandon, we all kind of concluded, like, Tyler's not what we expect Tyler. Like, I remember Tyler against the Saints a couple of years ago, 2 double posts down the middle. Like, he impacted the game. And I expect, okay, with DK out, Tyler's going to come alive and he's going to be a bigger factor in these games. And it's been JSN. Like, JSN had his kind of breakout game. Now, what I wonder is now if DK comes back, how does that look going forward? And if Tyler's, receiving targets go down and his share goes down, like, Cody White's a guy I'd like to see get more run. He had, a couple good catches in the last recent game, and he's a young receiver. Like, out of the guys you listed there, I don't see any of them being back next year.
Yeah.
And, the one question, that I'm going to add on top of this, because Ryan always brings up DK because that's his guy, and I love DK as well, but my thing has always been quarterbacks. How does Geno Smith, like, if you're going to pay DK for, say, like Seattle, by the way they did his contract this offseason, I think it might have been you, Curtis, that put it out, or somebody else said, that's an interesting move that generally leads to, hey, potentially they want to keep this player and extend him going forward.
Yeah.
Now that makes you wonder, because everyone's about, oh, well, you can't keep DK and Geno and fix this O-line. Is there a potential to keep both of them with extensions and fix this O-line? Or, what do you think could potentially happen here with Geno going forward?
Well, the ability is there. I mean, they could pick up $13 million and change if they extend DK Metcalf. They can pick up almost $19 million if they extend Geno Smith. So there's right there almost $35 million between those two players is available to them. It's really just thinking about, do you feel like you're in the position to win now or in the next 2 years? Or do you feel like you're a little further out and you need to maybe reel in your resources a little bit and start making some of those investments in the offensive line even more than what you would do conventionally? So I think Geno Smith is a very good quarterback. He's a bridge quarterback. The general consensus is he doesn't have the potential to lead a team to a Super Bowl. Now, Jared Goff doesn't have the potential to lead a team to a Super Bowl in my mind, but the team around him is so fantastic. He's actually gotten deep in the playoffs 2 or 3 times because he's had a great defense. He's had an offensive mastermind of a coach. Do the Seahawks have that? They don't. yet.
Right.
So, and I think his age is is going to be a question with him as it comes up, because he'll be 35. Do you extend him for 36, 37, and 38 years? That's really a tough question to ask. I know some of the fans that say, well, he was benched for 6 games or 6 seasons, and so he's fresh, and it doesn't, he doesn't have the wear and tear on his body that other quarterbacks that age. I don't know if NFL teams think that way. I
Right.
just don't. I
Yeah, I agree.
struggle with that. So
I
when he was 2022, he was having this fantastic year. I wrote an article proposing a contract extension, 3 years, 75 to 96 million, somewhere in that range, and it kind of blew some hair back on the internet with, whoa, wait a second, we're talking about a guy that's a franchise quarterback, and we're going to franchise tag him and $40 million a year, and it turns out he didn't have much of a market in 2022. And honestly, the last couple of years, he has not been able to match his 2022 performance. So now he's 2 years older, and he's 2 years removed from his best season. So will there be a real market for him? I struggle to say yes to that. And so in the marketplace, you're worth what a team is willing to pay. So, they may make a decision. They may extend him. They may, try and, hey, we have to move on. Or they may even say, we'll cut you, and then we'll negotiate an extension. So I think everything is on the table with him. So there is a way that they can do it. Bryce, to answer your question, O-line, Geno, and Metcalf, if they want to do it. Really, is all it is do you have the will to do it? But you're definitely pulling the purse strings, and it's got to work. Like we've said this year, they spent on Dodson, they spent on Baker, they spent on this, that. It hasn't worked. So if it works, great. But if it hasn't, you've racked up quite a bit of debt on your credit card, and you've set yourself back, kind of like Jamal Adams. We're still feeling the effects of a large contract and no 2 first-round picks. I'd love to have Elijah Vera Tucker and Garrett Wilson on the Seahawks right now, instead of lamenting that we had to cut Jamal Adams loose because he was so banged up.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned like the Lions and Goff, because that's kind of a Geno comparison a little bit sometimes. But you mentioned everything's got to go right. Everything's got to go right, and still, I mean, hey, look, they haven't made it. They haven't made the Super Bowl, and I'm not saying let's judge every team whether you make the Super Bowl. They had a great season. They're having a great season this year. Jared Goff threw 5 interceptions yesterday, and just the Texans managed just to have a really bad second half, and some of the inexperienced CJ Stroud kind of showed up yesterday in the second half. I thought missing, I think it was the kind of that corner route that guy was naked and he just threw it late. That would have kind of blown that game open. But so 5 picks from him. I don't have the confidence in, like Bryce says, in Schneider right now to get to that perfectness that the Detroit Lions has right now. That's a lot of dominoes that have to fall into place. So if that's the plan, and you're sitting there in the front office saying, if we get to that, Geno's okay. But then you mentioned bridge. I mean, how long is this bridge? Because if you go on to that's kind of not becoming a bridge quarterback anymore. If you're into year 4, year 5. So there's a couple of things, so the next question I got, because if you look at the emphasis on the O-line, and do people have the confidence in Schneider to drastically have a completely different way of thinking? Like, do we see Schneider completely overhauling this thing? Or let's hope Abe gets right. Maybe we pick up another guy like a Connor Williams. He's coming off another guy like that. We can get him on the cheap. Hope he works out. Kind of more like that. Maybe we sign a veteran guard. But then if you kind of see that happen, you roll Geno back. To me, I mean, I'd almost want to go in a different direction. Like, and this is not us saying we don't like Geno Smith. But the way the team's constructed and sitting back and the way you look at a guy like Kyler Murray, like a more mobile kind of guy. I'm not saying him, but just have a different almost style of guy.
Yeah.
But it almost seems like we're kind of further away from the next guy. Sam Howell sitting there. A lot of us, we're not saying he's the next guy. Who is the next guy? Or are they just in a position right now where they're like, hey, look, the numbers make sense. Maybe another 2-year kind of extension is going to be the way to go. How do you sort of see it playing out? If you were to have a bit of a crystal ball and just say, we're in the 2024 offseason, 25 offseason, how do you realistically see John going at it? Do you see Geno back? And how would you see the O-line? Just the history of John. Do you have the confidence there that the changes that need to be made are there? Or do you think we'll just re-sign DK, re-sign Geno, fluff up the O-line a little bit, maybe a guy in the draft, maybe a guard here? Because it's hard to think the other way. The guy's been here for 15 years.
Yeah.
We know his O-line history. You want to believe that he's really going to make a drastic move with this line that we know that needs to be done. But then when you sit back and say, reality-wise, how do you see it all playing?
Yeah. I think there's a few factors in there. One of the factors I think that, especially with this year, that plays into it more than we'd like to admit are the injuries to the team this year. Abe Lucas, imagine if you have the Abe Lucas of 2022 on this team right now, just that one position. Where do you think we're at? I mean, we don't. I'm not saying he'd be plowing Nick Bosa and Aiden Hutchinson on every single play, and we'd be dominant, but we'd be much better. Draymond Jones, the hamstring, he didn't practice practically the entire training camp because of that hamstring. Baker and Dodson missed chunks of time in the offseason with their injuries, and they never really fully recovered and got into the game plan and things like that. So I definitely think there's an element that's maybe out of John Schneider's control with this year's team. But as far as going forward, I think we really have to be in a spot where we have to be ready to be looking for a quarterback at any given time. And I think Sam Howell being traded for him, that was sort of an evidence of that maybe we didn't really care for the quarterbacks in this draft. We had the chance to go get one that had 18 games of experience as a starter, which is valuable. He didn't do great in it, but he is valuable. And like Bryce and I talked about in the preseason, he looked like he was applying the lessons of a new offensive coordinator and a better offensive coordinator. So, and like you said, I don't think he's the guy. I'm not thinking he's the savior of the franchise or anything like that. But I think John Schneider is annoyingly patient when it comes to drafting quarterbacks, because every year when he gives his pre-draft conference, well, yeah, this is the 14th year that I haven't drafted a quarterback, and back in Green Bay, I drafted a quarterback every year, and blah blah, that kind of stuff. So I'm feeling like there's a reluctance to get the guy that he sees. Maybe there isn't somebody that he sees just yet in the spot that he can go get. And I have to believe, like a CJ Stroud or Michael Penix, there was interest there, but they just couldn't get to their spot where they were able to do it or even trade up in that aspect. But I do think in time, when he finds someone, that he won't hesitate to go get him. He's identified in the past. We've talked about Aaron Rodgers. He talked about in Green Bay. He talked about getting that big, massive trade to go get the number 1 pick for Russell Wilson and get Josh Allen. Talked about Patrick Mahomes, identifying him, and there was that report that if he falls, the Seahawks are going to pick him up. And again, this was during prime Russell Wilson days. So there's a little bit of that, and I'm also reminded of the first few years of the franchise. They kind of cycled through quarterbacks like crazy. the first few years until they got someone. So they're not afraid to hedge their bets, and they're not afraid to, make some choices and then walk away from some of those choices, like Matt Flynn. But is there a pick out there that they really like? I know last year he name dropped Quinn Ewers. He's not been great this year. He's been banged up, and then he's had Arch Manning breathing down his neck. He may stay again for another year. I don't know. But there's players like that they look like somebody that he might enjoy drafting. And perhaps his not great year drops him a little bit into a range where they can, okay, you're not our savior. There isn't the pressure, but we can develop you behind Geno Smith for a year or two and then give you the reins. So I do think there's options. I've often thought that one of the first orders of business this offseason would be to sign Sam Howell to an extension, like a 2-year, a very simple contract, 2-year, $10 million, 2-year, $12 million, something like that, just to have some stability on the roster. And then if they need to make some moves, move on from Geno or make a trade or look in the draft, they're not completely hamstrung without having a quarterback and, oh man, the one guy we really wanted is gone, and now what do we do at the most important position in football? So I think that would be something. I think a lot of people in the fandom have forgotten the comments that were made in February and March about Geno Smith. When they first hired Mike McDonald, they brought him in and they were talking, and him and John Schneider had a script. They literally had a script they were both working off of. You could, if you read them on paper, you wouldn't know which one was talking. Whenever about Smith, we love him as a player, but let's talk about Drew Lock. Drew Lock is great. And they changed the subject to Drew Lock, and he wasn't even on the roster at that time. He was pending to be a free agent. So they changed the script with that. They talked a lot about Drew Lock, and then there was those comments that they made this in the offseason where, well, Geno will be our quarterback until he won't be. And then there was a leak out of Adam Schefter, I think, that said, okay, the Seahawks have informed Geno Smith that he'll be on the roster this year. What? Will there ever be a leak where the Kansas City Chiefs say, yeah, we've informed Patrick Mahomes that he'll be our quarterback this year? That never. So I think I don't say they hate Geno Smith. I don't say they want to get rid of Geno Smith, but I think they're open to the options than fans realize.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that, Curtis. You've put up, you do a lot of work with Seahawks Draft Blog with Rob Staten. You're kind of his cap guy. Well, you are his cap guy and roster construction. So I know you wrote an article. You were nice enough to send it towards me so I could get a look at it. It's a great article, and I want to share it with our listeners and people on YouTube that view this show. So I'm going to bring it up, and if you can kind of walk us through like this article and kind of the different moves that can be made that you alluded to, I think it would, our fans would really like it and enjoy it. So I'm going to bring that up on the screen right now. All right, so here we go. This is Curtis's, basically his breakdown. So Curtis, why don't you kind of walk us through what exactly you kind of done with this, I guess you call it the early comprehensive look at the state of the 2025 salary cap.
Yeah. So what I try to do is not necessarily make a prediction of what the Seahawks will do, but is something to just kind of frame the debate a little bit about how much money do they actually have to spend, where can they get money to spend in a big picture sort of way. And so my accounting background comes out. We have to look at our expenses first. We always have to look at how much we don't have first. And it's an ugly start to the year because they're already over the cap for 2025. So they need to get under the cap. But then there's things that will inevitably come up, like you have to pay for your draft class. There's some players that have earned some incentive money that needs to be paid out. as well as making sure you have that nest egg for the practice squad and being able to bring in injury players this year. So what that does is it kind of frames how how much you have to play with, what do you have to do to get some more money to go in and really make some decisions that you make. And then also, who has a really, really big cap gain if you're going to cut them or trade them, and who do you want to keep on the team? So there's all kinds of options. Like I said, it's really up to your creativity and imagination as to how you build this team. But the premise for me really was, if you really want to do it right with this offensive line, you have to go and get at least one top player. And yes, I understand that that's not something that traditionally they've done. They've avoided that. But the benefit of having such a horrible offensive line, it may force you to reevaluate your thought processes with that. 1 year they could have had a couple of good tackles, like Jack Conklin. He may have not wanted to come to Seattle. He says he's a Midwest guy, but the money that the Browns spent on Jack Conklin, the Seahawks spread across 3 very mediocre offensive linemen. And so I'm more and more sold by the idea of, instead of having lots and lots of depth of okay players, having a couple of good standout players and then building around that with your youth and your draft picks and developing some of those guys. Kind of like we talked about, Bryce, with Mike Jarrell, Jalen Sundell, guys like that, maybe they're not starters, but if they could be a 4-year backup at a reasonable rate and be good, then that's a win. So yeah.
So yeah, Curtis. So let's kind of just walk us through and just tell me when to guide down the page. But right here we got the start of it, which is the estimate for the 2025 cap expenses. Yeah. So just if you wouldn't mind walking us through this process.
Sure. So what we're looking at is, I started with the cap number per over the cap. They have 43 players accounted for on the roster, so that's a pretty high number. There's a lot of players that are already on the roster. Some teams only have like 20 or 30 players, and that really definitely plays into the number that they have. Then I added the projected draft pool that they get, so they have a handful of picks this year. And over the cap is real nice because they include their projected compensatory picks. So includes their 4th and 5th round pick. So that $10,000 there includes how much, the cash that they typically will have to pay for all the picks that they make. That'll go up and go down as their draft position changes. So, and it's really interesting, if they keep losing, that number goes up. The picks get more expensive because the higher you go in the draft, the more expensive the picks are. So there's always kind of a counterbalance to things there. Then we've got a couple of proven performance escalators. This is something that's been built into the CBA for players that are on their rookie contracts that perform really well. And so in the 4th year of their contract, they'll get a nice healthy bump if they played very well, which is, I enjoy that. I think that's fair, because you have a player making $750,000 a year and he's producing $15 or $20 million worth of value. Hey, let's give him a couple million extra bucks. So you've got Retool in there who earned a Pro Bowl. That's the biggest cherry of them all, is getting a Pro Bowl. And then you've got Abe Lucas and Kobe Bryant, who have played at least 35% of the snaps over the 3 years, which they will by the time that the season is over. So they'll get a nice little bump for their 2025 contract. Then we've got Geno Smith, the escalators. He's got $15 million of escalators. I've been tracking those. He's not on line for any of them except the yardage one. And that's mainly because they're throwing the ball like crazy. So, and he's effective. Don't get me wrong. He's effective. So there's a couple $million there that we project. And then your $10 million is your nest egg for the practice squad that you've got to pay in September. And you always want a little bit of money for injured players. When you have a guy that's making $5 million and he goes on injured reserve, that $5 million doesn't come off your cap. And you have to get another player to fill a spot, even if it's a minimum salary, $600,000, $700,000 player. You've got to have a little money to be able to pay that. So at the moment, as a starting point, it's not pretty, guys. Look at that, $35 million over the cap. That's just sort of the reality of the situation. Now, some of this stuff doesn't have to come out until June, July, August. Like you sign your draft picks in June and July. That's when the money comes out and hits your cap. The $10 million for the practice squad, you don't need that until September. So it's not like day one of March, they need to find $35 million. So there's that. And then what I did is I went down and I added in some projected contracts for guys that I think pretty much all of us want to stay on the team. The first one, of course, is Ernest Jones. I gave him projected a three-year, $45 million contract, not unlike what Patrick Queen got in Pittsburgh. And he's a free agent this year, so obviously he's going to be like Leonard Williams. He's going to be a priority you want to get in. And the 2025 number, the first year number I used, is just kind of the average of some of those players and how they're handled by the team. So $7.5 million there. That adds on. Reek Woolen, 4 years, $92 million. Ouch, that hurts. But he's in the class with Patrick Surtain, Jair Alexander, some of those other players, and I think as good as he is, I think he'd be even better. And he has the ability to just take that one side of the field off. So he's somebody you really want there. Kenneth Walker, I looked at the Chuba Hubbard contract and the Josh Jacobs contract in Green Bay, and just sort of averaged that out. A 4-year, $40 million contract for Kenneth Walker. And then Boye Mafe, also 4 years, $92 million. That's similar to Jonathan Grenard and Rashawn Gary in Green Bay that they got. So there's $7 million of cap hit there. And then the last one, there's DK Metcalf, a 3-year, $95 million contract is what I would guess. That's similar to what CeeDee Lamb got. And you always have to remember when you project this stuff, we have a year of inflation coming. So if they match those, then that's actually a little bit of a gain for the Seahawks. So I think that's in. But they actually pick up money by extending DK Metcalf because that first year cap hit is much lower. So there's $12 million there that they actually gain when they break out the checkbook and sign Metcalf. So that gives us about another $8 million over the cap, and we need to find almost $44 million now. So now we're in business. I mean, we really got to roll up our sleeves and do some work. So if you scroll down and keep going to the next chart, we've got there's our $44 million, and now we're going to make some moves to get some players up. So we've got $17 million we can gain on Tyler Lockett, 11.5 on Draymond Jones, $9 million on Noah Fant, $7.5 million is just a guess for me on Uchenna Nwosu, and Rayshon Jenkins is $5.4 million. So that gets us in the black, so to speak, with $6.6 million of spending money.
That's not a lot though, Curtis. Like if you think about it, that's scary. Like the fact that this team is like with the moves, and we're talking about some significant moves here, right? Like yes. Tyler being whatever Tyler does.
Yes.
Getting rid of Draymond, getting rid of Noah, getting rid of potentially Chenna, which I talked about earlier on a couple shows a while back with Ryan, that I think with his injury history, like that's a real possibility that we move on because of Derek Hall and Boye Mafe is, kind of upcoming now. Yeah. Rayshon Jenkins, I'm not too surprised about, but that's just crazy that like we're $6 million in the cap at this point. What time of the offseason would this roughly do you think this would kind of be more applicable here, this $6 million number?
Well, that's the thing is it isn't timed out exactly in chronological order, but like Tyler Lockett has a roster bonus. I think it says March 18th there. So something needs to be done before that because then that locks in the money as guaranteed. Uchenna Nwosu, his salary, a chunk of his salary guarantees February 10th, a few days after the Super Bowl. So they would have to act very, very quickly after the Super Bowl is over. And I would hope that, as soon as the season's over, they're talking to his agent to see if they could do something, maybe convert some of the salary to incentives and, have him work on a lower contract. But worst come to worst, they may have to, just like you said, just move on. So, and then really it's how do you time these things? How do you want these things to work out? Do they want to do these things in February and March, let these guys find another market for themselves? Or is it better for them to kind of reach out, sign a player, and then bring them in and then let the guy go and then file the contracts on the same day? So it's really up to how they want to put it all together. So yeah, and that's kind of the challenge that we're talking about here. There's hard decisions that have to be made, and before we've even addressed the offensive line, we've got to think about how do we replace these players right here. So you've got like Tyler and Noah. So there's two players on the offense. Could you replace them with AJ Barner and Jake Bobo? I know that sounds silly, but as far as production goes, can you do that? Or do you have to go and get someone in free agency or find someone in the draft that you can feel like can replace those guys? Cutting Draymond and Nwosu, they're not providing much right now, but you see what's happening when they're not providing much. So, there's decisions that have to be made, and that $6.5 million could get sucked up real quick before you even talk about investing in the offensive line.
Curtis, I'm not going to have you go through this whole thing because I want people to also be able to go over on Seahawks Draft Blog and read this for themselves. But I appreciate you going through this to the point of potential guys that we get rid of, what this team looks like cap-wise, kind of their current situation. So I really appreciate you going through that for us, Curtis. This was great information for our listeners.
Yeah. They are going to be forced to make decisions this year. And it's like today with Tyrell Dodson. There's going to be some decisions that are going to be made. And especially if they cut or trade Geno Smith, the fan base is not going to react very well to that at large. But I think many will understand what they're trying to accomplish when they do that, because there's almost $25 million of room at stake if they move on from Geno Smith. So it may just be a numbers thing.
Yeah, you know what? We thought last offseason was interesting. I think this one's going to be more interesting because, like you said, Mike's first offseason, Geno Smith question. Like it's they're going to be forced to make decisions. I mean, a lot of times off seasons can even be, more interesting than the season. I mean, I love the season.
Yes.
We all love football, but it's going to be. And that's the thing about the NFL. That's why it's a 365 league. But hey, look, since we're still playing ball and we're on the bye week, let's really quickly just touch on this Niners game. What you think, real quick? Get a little preview here. And if you got a prediction and a score, but coming out of the bye week, we're in Santa Clara. How do you see this thing playing out? And if there's a key to this game that you think that they need to, possibly come out of there with a victory, what is it? And what do you got as far as predictions concerned?
Yeah, I think it'll be a closer game than what we saw in the first matchup. I would actually be very happy with a well contested, a tight loss. If they're right in it, and it's just a matter of who makes the better play, like George Kittle making that tippy toe play and catch in the corner yesterday against Tampa Bay, just to win the game, that kind of thing. I could be okay with that. The thing that I always notice about the Niners is they force missed tackles. They're the best team in the NFL at it. We always talk about their talent, their schemes, and all that, and that's true. But those guys are warriors. George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, those guys, they're not just fast runners and in the position at the right time. They make you miss. And looking at the highlights of the Tampa game, every drive that they went down the field and scored on, there was a big play, an explosive play where a Buck defender had the guy in his sights and was grabbing air after that, and they got down to the field for 30 yards. So I think that's a big factor for the Seahawks that they need to tackle. I mean, the first guy that gets a hold of him needs to bring him down, and everybody else needs to swarm to the ball carrier. There's just no other way to beat the Niners than to do that and to play as tough and dedicated as they are. The other factor that I've hounded on for years, the Niners are a good run defense, but you have to be able to run on them. You have to, whether that's some creative dipsy doodle stuff or whether it's just right up the gut and just we know this is the teeth of the defense. We're going to do it anyway, like they did in the Marshawn Lynch days. You remember those classic battles of Titans. Lynch would have 100 yards on 28 or 29 carries. He'd have 3.5 yards a carry, but he'd bust through given time. He always did. And so they've struggled with their run game and their play calling and whatnot this year. But they have to be able to run the game, if for no other reason that it keeps the offense off the field and keeps them from exploding. And then there's Geno Smith. He just has not played well against the Niners. And I know there's the pass rushers and the offensive line and all those things, but he just, the heat gets too hot at times, it feels like, with him against the Niners. So if he's got his calm and his cool together, that'll go a long way toward making this a really good game. Because the Niners they've been mired like the other teams in the NFL this year, like the Chiefs. Yeah, they have a winning record, but there's been some close shaves, and they missed, I think, was it 3 field goals yesterday? So they made it a lot closer than it should have been. So could the Seahawks catch them on a day where they're not doing as well? I'm saying that, and with the knowledge that they whipped the Seahawks without Christian McCaffrey, and I think, was it Deebo was out that day too?
Yeah.
And Ayuk was already out.
They had a fifth string running back run 85 yards down the field on him or something like that.
Right. So. Yeah. Mason was really good that day. So,
the other guy that the guy that sealed it. I don't even know his name.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
He had a career day.
Yeah, with the one run.
So I think there's a lot stacked against them, but like you mentioned earlier on, the bye week and how fresh they came out after that 3 games in 10 days or whatever, and then they came out and they looked like a really good team against Atlanta. They went into Atlanta and just took them apart, which was great. They played the game they wanted to play. Get ahead of them, stop the run, and then unleash the guys on Kirk Cousins, because Kirk Cousins is not good when he's pressured.
No.
But and then yesterday, they didn't. The Buccaneers didn't pressure the quarterback very much. They just didn't have him in their sights. He was very comfortable back there, and he's just so good now that he's ascended to another level. And when he has time and those weapons, he's going to pick you apart. So, the Boye Mafe, the Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, Derek Hall, those guys are going to have to be really on to make it a good game for the Seahawks.
Nice. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's gonna be interesting. I think the bye week is gonna be a telltale here. We're gonna really kind of see what it's all about. So real quick, I'll just echo the same things you said, but I think the biggest thing, Geno's got to have a clean game. He can't turn the ball over. He just can't, or else it's not even going to be a close game. They'll run they'll roll him. So he's got to be smarter. I think the biggest thing is play smart, make the right decisions. Again, people are there's been excuses about those red zone picks. You got to be better. You're a 10-year veteran in this league. You can't do it. I do have them losing. I have them losing on the road. So I got
Yeah.
the 9, 30-20.
Yeah. Like I said, I'll take a loss, but a well fought, well contested loss. That's what I'm looking for more than, I think they're going to win, but
Yeah.
they may surprise us. You never know.
Yeah.
I've kind of got it's weird. For me, I want to see the offense be balanced. I want to see Ryan Grubb get out of the shotgun happy stuff he's been in lately and try and mix in some more under center and find creative ways to run the ball that way, pass the ball, maybe move Geno's pocket on some bootlegs and stuff. Like just get him outside of just sitting behind an offensive line that is piss poor and can't pass for long enough for your deep concepts. And that's the other thing. Develop some sort of quick game. Get the ball out of his hand quick. Make it easier on him than what you've been. And then on defense, just don't give up the big play. Don't let George Kittle run a corner out for 30 yards when it's George Kittle. Like, don't let CMC take a toss and cut it back and run it 60 yards down your throat. Like, I'm okay. They're going to get their plays, but don't let them be these massive explosive plays. I've got the game a little bit closer. I think it's 23-17 San Francisco. Yeah. I'd love to pick the Hawks, and they, like you said, Curtis, they may surprise us. But for me, the Seahawks are still trying to find their way in what this team looks like, and they're still working through that process. And I think they may have some more answers coming out of this bye, like they did out of the mini bye versus Atlanta. Yeah. But you're also not playing Atlanta. You're playing the 49ers in Santa Clara, which isn't going to be an easy task to overcome. So I've got the Niners 23-17.
Yeah. And they had a good stretch. I mean, against the Niners at times, even after the real Legion of Boom era, they played well at times. One of the things that I noticed that I don't know why they've gone away from is what they would do is they would motion DK around pre-snap. This is the Russell Wilson days. And they would get a good matchup. And I can't tell you how many times I'd be sitting there going, throw it to DK because he's got a linebacker on him because he's in the slot and they motion around to him. And it's like, okay, DK is faster than that guy. He's as big, if not bigger than that guy. And he can jump further and higher than that guy. So get the ball to him. So, there's some creativity there that the last few games, it's just been, okay, DK's over there on the left and we're going to throw some deep shots to him. And, Charvarius Ward and Lemonnier, I think is his name, have played well against that, honestly, because it's kind of basic. So give us some concepts to look at. And Bryce, I'm 100% behind you. Get DK or get Geno moving. Get him out of the pocket. That classic, I don't know what you call that play, that crossing play where you have like a tight end in the short and the wide receiver in the long coming across the field. Yeah. So he's got a short target and a long target. Yeah. That was a Seahawks staple. Bring that back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be we all want him to come out and just have a good game. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be, like I said, I think this is going to tell us a lot. But Curtis, we really appreciate you coming on and joining us, breaking down, especially a lot of the cap talk and just in general, it was awesome conversation. We appreciate you coming back on the show. Why don't you let everybody know watching the show what you got, what you're working on, and where people can find all your stuff.
Yeah. So I post on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Every week on game day, I'll post a watch points article that talks about some of the stuff that we just talked about a little bit more in depth. Where can the Seahawks attack? What do they need to defend? What do they need to do well in that game? And so there's always data points. There's always something that somehow I dig up and find a little something interesting. So it's a nice companion piece with your morning coffee. Read it as you get close to the game, and you'll be able to get some points that really, the whole point is to enhance watching the game. And so if you can do that, that's great. We have cap articles that come up. I also do a quarterly report card. So I just did a second quarter report card. And let me just say, I hate that this 17-game season, I used to be able to do quarterly report cards on the actual quarter. So I just waited till the bye week to do the 5-game report card. So
nice.
His first one of the year. And we're also looking forward to the draft because of the way they played lately, that that's a really enjoyable treat to watch, to see his first look at all the players that he studied over the summer and into the fall. So that's up there on Seahawks Draft Blog as well.
Good. Yeah, that's awesome stuff. Guys, go check it out, SeahawksDraftBlog.com. Curtis, we appreciate it again, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again in the future here.
Thanks, guys. That was a blast. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
Have a good night, Curtis.
All right.
Thanks, Curtis. Guys, Curtis Allen on the show once again, breaking down Hawks. Yeah, awesome conversation, man. The cap talk, like, just gives everybody a really good insight. And especially, if it's like, hey man, let's just go out and spend money. It's just, you go check out Curtis's article, because he kind of really breaks it down of, might bring your expectations down a little bit, or just kind of give you an idea sort of where this team's at as far as cap, money, and players' contracts.
Yeah, no, it's always great having Curtis on the show. He really breaks it down. He makes it really thorough. So I highly suggest for our listeners, you want to understand what this team can do, what the offseason may look like going into 2025 with, potentially players that we love that may be moving on. Read what Curtis posts out on Seahawks Draft Blog. It's really insightful stuff. And if you follow him on X, he's also tweeting on there constantly about different things that they may do. Highly suggest going and following Curtis also on his Twitter page as well.
Absolutely. So guys, like we said, we've been talking about it. We're in a bye week, so getting ready for the Niners. It's going to tell us a lot. So, but let's, even though we got them, we didn't pick them to win, still hope we can come back the week after celebrating a win, because that's all we want from this team, is to come in, win every week, and just enjoy the game. So that's it, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.